Lipids. Lipids include fats and oils. Examples of food sources could include butter or olive oil. This is a seriously diverse group, meaning there are a lot of types of lipids. There are triglycerides, there are phospholipids, there are steroids. These are just some examples. Most, but not all, lipids have building blocks of glycerol and fatty acids. One thing, though, that lipids generally share? Generally, they're hydrophobic, or at least contain a significant hydrophobic component. That means lipids, or at least a major component of them, don't like water. Lipids generally won't dissolve in water. And that's interesting, as generally the other biomolecules will. So how are lipids important to an organism in the structure and function of its cells? Remember how we said all cells, plant cells, animal cells, all cells, have membranes? Well, thank you phospholipids for that phospholipid bilayer, because that's right, lipids make up cell membrane structure.
Hi, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Muhammad Ibn Hakimi bin Muhammad Imran, and all of you can call me Sedenia. Today, we are going to continue chapter 4 under the subtopic 4.4, which is lipids. Before we start, I would like to do some recap about previous lesson, which is about proteins. So I just want to highlight a few things here, which is, first of all, you must know about the elements that contains in the protein, which is carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and also nitrogen. And then you must know that the monomer of protein is called amino acid. Yes. And then you must know that the bond formed between two molecules of amino acids, we call it as what? Dipeptide bond. And last but not least, we have to know the levels of the protein, which is we have the primary level, secondary, tertiary, and also quaternary. Alright, that's all for protein. Before we start our lesson, I would like all of you to think of something when I show you this kind of picture. Okay, we have butter. Alright, can you imagine of something? We have nuts. What else? We have coconut. And last but not least, we have olive oil. Contains fats, contains oils. Yes, that's all true. But in science, or specifically in biology, we call it as lipids. Before we jump to the lesson, I would like to highlight the learning outcomes for today's session. So at the end of these topics, I want my student should be able to first list the elements in lipids, explain the main types of lipids, thirdly, describe the formation and breakdown of triglyceride, 4, write and explain the word equation of formation and breakdown of triglyceride, and last but not least, justify the importance of lipids in cells and multicellular organisms. Alright, lipids. What is lipid? Lipid is naturally occurring hydrophobic compound that found in plant and animal tissues, made up of carbon, hydrogen, and also oxygen, same as carbohydrates. Next, we are going to learn about the characteristic of lipids. Firstly, is insoluble in water. Like you see in this picture, you can see that the oil is separated with the water, so it is insoluble in water. But lipids soluble in other organic solvents like alcohol, ether, and also chloroform. Next, we are going to learn about types of lipids. There are 4 of them, which is, first of all, we are going to learn about fats, we are going to learn about waxes, we are going to learn about phospholipid, and last but not least, we are going to learn about steroids. Next, we are going to learn about fats. Fats and oils are triglycerides. Triglycerides are a type of ester formed from the condensation of one glycerol molecule with 3 molecules of fatty acids. Triglycerides can be hydrolyzed again into fatty acids and glycerol through the reaction of hydrolysis. Glycerols are a type of 3-carbon alcohol that contain 3 hydroxyl group. In this video, it shows that the formation of triglycerides from 1 molecule of glycerol and 3 molecules of fatty acids with the process of condensation that forming triglycerides and water. There are 2 types of fatty acids, namely saturated fatty acids and unsaturated fatty acids. So these are the similarities that you can see here, the similarities of both saturated fatty acids and unsaturated fatty acids. The first thing that both of these similar in terms of the elements, which is it contains carbon, hydrogen and also oxygen. They also contain glycerol and also fatty acids, and both contains non-polar molecules. Alright, now we want to compare the differences between saturated and unsaturated fatty acids. So first of all, we are going to list down the characteristics of saturated fatty acids that different from the unsaturated fatty acids. Alright, as you can see here, saturated fatty acids only have single bond between them, and it will not form additional bond because the bond is already saturated. And saturated fatty acids also exist in solid at room temperature. Meanwhile, for unsaturated fatty acids, it contains at least one double bond between carbon atom. The double bond in the unsaturated fatty acids can still receive additional hydrogen atom because the bonds between the carbon atoms is unsaturated. Unsaturated fats exist in liquid at room temperature.
The difference between saturated versus unsaturated fatty acids. Saturated fatty acids, notice how it's a long chain, carbon to carbon to carbon to carbon, and there's a single bond in between every carbon. And the reason it's called saturated because the rest of the atoms involved are hydrogens. This chain of carbon is filled with or saturated, completely filled with and saturated with hydrogen. Remember, carbon bonds up to 4 times. Every single open bond is occupied by a hydrogen. And as a result, this saturated fatty acid chain is dense and compact and therefore solid at room temperature, such as butter that you see in the upper right hand corner. These also tend to be, the saturated fatty acids also tend to be the fatty acids that are from animals. For instance, butter is made from cow's milk. Well, when we look at an unsaturated fatty acid, at least one double bond in between 2 of the carbons. And because of that double bond, there's less space for hydrogen to occupy. If you're wondering, well, why can't I just put 2 hydrogens right there in red in those open gaps? Well, remember, carbon bonds 4 times. If I add those 2 red hydrogens, that would be a 5th bond onto those 2 carbons that have the double bond. So that doesn't fit, doesn't work. So carbon bonds 4 times when we get rid of those 2 in red. So here is a unsaturated fat. Notice how it's completely filled with hydrogen. You also notice that there's a kink in it. That double bond causes the chain of carbon to kink and bend a little bit, and this causes the unsaturated fatty acids to be more liquid at room temperature, such as olive oil. And these tend to be the fatty acids that come from plants and fish fats. And so there you have it, a quick side-by-side comparison of saturated versus unsaturated fatty acids. I hope you found this video.
So these are the comparisons side to side between saturated fats and unsaturated fats. Next type of lipid is wax. What is wax? Wax contains one molecule of alcohol that combines with another molecule of fatty acids, and it is also waterproof. Next type of lipid is phospholipid. Phospholipid is a major component of plasma membrane. Phospholipid is made up of one molecule of glycerol that combines with 2 molecules of fatty acids and one group of phosphate. Next is steroids. Steroids do not contain fatty acids. Examples of steroids are cholesterol, testosterone, estrogen, and progesterone. Next, we are going to learn about the importance of lipids in cells and also multicellular organisms. First of all, fats function as reserve energy for animals. Secondly, fats function as a liner to protect internal organs. Third, fats also act as a heat insulator for animals. Moving on to waxes, they are an important component in cuticles that cover the epidermis of leaf and sebum secreted by our skin. Glycolipid function is to ensure the stability of the plasma membrane. Glycolipid also help in the cell identification process, and last but not least, cholesterol is important in steroid hormone synthesis. Now we have come to the end of this topic. What I learned from this topic is that everything in this world has its own function, from the very biggest creation to the smallest thing that can ever be. It has its own function and benefit towards each other. So therefore, we have to be grateful because Allah is the Almighty. Thanks for watching for this subtopic, which is lipids, and I hope all of you learned something in this subtopic. For further understanding, you can scan this QR code to answer a quiz regarding lipids. That's all for me. Bye and Assalamualaikum.